the forefront of that. And also because of you, right? And what you told us. When we did our Voice of the Member survey last year, and we have another one out now. If you haven't completed that, please find it in your newsletters from me and do that. It's for everyone to fill out. But the Voice of the Member survey last year told us that what you wanted, among many things, but in particular, was more content, more connection to colleagues, and more conversation with colleagues. And so we are making that kind of access more possible with a lot of events like this one. So really happy to be here today. And I just want to introduce Eric Bergman, who is going to be our moderator today. Eric is the Managing Director of Americas and Industry Programs at MIT Sloan Executive Education. He's also a board member finishing his 6-year term at the end of this fiscal year, the end of June. And he has long been on the benchmarking committee, and he was the chair of the board as well last year. So he's become a good friend of mine over the years. And Eric is also, on the personal side, many things, but he's a lover of music of all kinds and a lover of Formula One, which starts tomorrow, I understand. So you can guess what Eric will be doing at least part of his day tomorrow. All right, Eric, I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Melanie. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this research webinar today, UNICON research webinar. Just before we start, one important item that by policy we do at the beginning of every gathering of members of UNICON, which is to confirm UNICON's antitrust competition policy statement, which I am sharing right now. You should all be able to see that. I think the essential point here is that because UNICON is a United States corporation, we are subject to antitrust law in the United States, and that has some implications for the kind of interactions that we have together. We are not to engage or have conversations around activity that would be considered anti-competitive, such as talking about how we set our prices or how we pay people. Those are considered uncompetitive activities, and UNICON believes very strongly in improving the quality of executive education and the competition in the field of executive education. So very important that we all observe that policy. And now, my great pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Marcos Serrato. He is the Vice President for Learning Enterprise at the Office of the Provost at Arizona State University. Prior to this role, where he is also a professor of the practice at Thunderbird School of Management, Marco had leadership roles at the University of Chicago and at Tec de Monterrey. He was there when I first met him, and we worked together on the UNICON benchmarking committee. Last year, Marco and a former colleague of mine from MIT Sloan, Cate Reavis, collaborated on a project that examined the topic of how executive, professional, continuing education, lifelong learning has been approached across universities. And this is something which has been a particular interest of Marcos, so he brings some perspective to this. But as UNICON research, it was essential that we go in and examine what have institutions actually done who have made this pivot or have thought about this pivot and decided not to do that. It's a very interesting project, which I suspect many of you have seen and read. And Marco is with us today to talk about the work. He welcomes questions, interactions along the way. This is not a static presentation, but intended to be dynamic, interactive exchange among members in which we all learn from each other. So, Marco, I turn the floor over to you, and it's yours.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you as well, Melanie. I guess I should start saying that it's always so I'm always so happy to see so many familiar faces from so many different UNICON member institutions. Also, I should say to see some new names and some new faces as well. And as both Melanie and Eric mentioned, I think that every single time that there's a chance to be part of a UNICON, even on either online or a live session, is always very encouraging to see to meet some colleagues within our industry. When Melanie was introducing Eric, it was coming through my mind some of the first meetings that I attended in UNICON. Don't ask me how long ago that was, but that was I'm thinking like almost 15 years ago by now. And it's always really nice, in addition to how we share ideas and what is going on within our own institutions, also just to learn from each other and to build, I would say, this really nice friendship and relationships overall. So all of that is to say that I'm 100% confident that Eric's weekend is going to be, if not fully, partially focused on watching Formula One for sure, because I know that since several years ago. But having said that, as Eric mentioned, we are very enthusiastic about sharing some insights about this overall research report. I will try to do my best to, I would say, to highlight some of the key pieces. What I think about why is it that each one of you are devoting some time within your agendas to be here, is because you want to get valuable insights that might be helpful for your own institutions. And the research report was precisely organized around that. What I'm planning to do is just to walk you through, I would say, a brief presentation that summarizes what was the purpose of the project, what is it that we did through the project, what are some of the institutions, the profile of the institutions, because we kept them confidential just while being careful, even as Eric was outlining of our UNICON's antitrust policy, but gathering all of that information and organizing in a way that presents valuable insights for all of you. Eric already mentioned this, but I will encourage each one of you, as I'm presenting, if there are any comments, any questions that you might have, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If I'm not doing my best job at reading the comments in the chat, I'm sure that Eric will help me make sure that I'm reading them. But the more interactive that we do this, I think the more valuable that this is going to be. So having said that, I will start sharing my screen, and hopefully you all are able to see my screen by now. I think that you are able to see. Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. So as Eric was outlining this, I would say the why this research project was developed within UNICON. Eric outlined it pretty well, and Melanie, of course, as well. It is just based on some of the things that UNICON member institutions are interested in. I still remember one of the first calls with Aldemir that he's joining us today as well, when we started talking about the interest of UNICON member institutions, and we started speaking about two things. One, which I think both things are captured in the title, this so-called lifelong learning perspective. The way that I will summarize it is there is this need out there, the context out there is changing so much and so fast that, of course, learning, not just in terms of leadership development, executive development, but quite often even upskilling, reskilling. We have seen that with AI, of course, as it happened in the past with other topics and technologies as well. Lifelong learning turns into a must nowadays. And that is paired with something that has been an ongoing discussion within several institutions, which is we have an executive education unit, which in most cases is part of a business school, but quite often there is an opportunity to collaborate or to integrate with things that are happening beyond the executive education unit, but within your higher ed institution or university. And how to do that, different institutions have followed different approaches. So this research project was precisely focused on identifying what has happened around that. So the presentation is, as I mentioned, three parts. I will speak very briefly. I think that there is no need to speak about the why in terms of the lifelong learning opportunity. I will just highlight a couple of things. I will highlight a couple of things in terms of the research methodology. And I will say the core of the presentation is the entire research project was organized around what we define as a strategic framework. And you will hear me repeat this a couple of times during the presentation because I really want to underscore it. something that I think is important, or one of the key findings out of this report, is that there is no unique right model that might fit all institutions. However, what this strategic framework presents is what are we frame that around 8 strategic choices that are important to consider as an institution, as an executive education unit, and within the broader scope of your business school or university higher ed institution, in terms of the strategic choices that need to be made. And I will speak a little more about that in a moment. Very, very briefly, as I mentioned, in terms of the lifelong learning opportunity, again, without spending a lot of time. And yes, Jason, the presentation will be, correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie, Danielle, but it will be available, and we'll be happy to share it with all of you, these slides, in addition to the research report. The one thing that I will highlight, the deck captures highlights. I will strongly encourage you to go and look at the details that are presented in the research report as well. Something that I will highlight in terms of the lifelong learning opportunity, again, I already talked about what is happening out there. The context is changing so much and so fast. Something that I will add that came out of the conversations with some of the institutions, and we will see a little bit about the profile of the institutions in a moment. I am sure that several of you have gone through this within your institutions. This is particularly, I would say, critical in the US, but happening in other countries worldwide as well. The value of a college degree is being challenged also, and so that is something that presents an additional challenge for some of our institutions. And something that is happening as well, especially on research-based institutions, is that research is being challenged in terms of how it is funded because of several changes that are taking place. What I want to put in the table while highlighting that is that quite often several, I would say, leadership within several institutions, they look at executive education, continuous learning as a third important arm for the higher education institution for growth. In addition to serving degree-seeking audiences, in addition to research knowledge creation, how is it that serving individuals at every stage of life is something that can grow at a greater extent? Of course, we as executive education units, we've been doing that for quite some time, but something that I've heard even from some of you as well is, well, now my institution is thinking about how to do this in a more university-wide basis. Some institutions have tried it and it has not worked, and I will present some of the perspectives on that. Other ones have done it and it's working really well for them. Other ones are in the middle. I will be speaking a little bit about that. And that takes me to this slide, which is why this matters for executive education. Of course, I usually highlight the fact that executive education institutions, executive education units, this is my executive bias judgment speaking maybe, but we are always faster in terms of understanding the needs of the audiences that we want to serve compared to the traditional degree-oriented market. So moving to that demand-driven model, given that pace of change taking place out there, a little bit of the Netflix moment where education is facing massive disruption from commercial platforms. You can see just a couple there that offer affordable, short skill-based training. The point that I already mentioned in terms of institutional survival, in terms of how this is quite often perceived as an additional revenue stream. We all know that, yes, there are opportunities out there in the market, but they are not that easy to pursue. So that's part of the why it matters as well. And something that I think is important as well, executive education quite often is also a front door on how we as business schools, as higher ed institutions, we connect with employers, corporations, organizations overall. With that in mind, jumping into the second part, which is a little bit of the approach and methodology, we gathered information from 10. These ones were, I would say, picked in a very intentional manner, and thank you to Melanie who helped us based on the ongoing conversation with UNICON member institutions to identify 10 different institutions, and I will share a little more about those institutions, the profile overall in a moment. But again, with different perspectives within the spectrum, from fully decentralized to fully centralized in terms of their university-wide approach to cover lifelong learning. The research covered not just gathering quantitative data through a survey that we shared with them, but we also had, and that was what Cate Reavis, who was the colleague working with me on this project. We held interviews with each leaders within each of these institutions, one-on-one sessions, just to gather some additional insights. And there was some secondary research as well, with the ultimate goal of identifying, again, how universities move beyond silos toward more integrated university-wide approaches. This is one slide that summarizes the profile of those 10 institutions. I would say two highlights here. First, I would say the global distribution of the institutions. 5 of those institutions are based in North and Latin America, 3 of those institutions based in Europe, and 2 of those institutions based in Asia and Oceania as well. Second thing to highlight, as I previously mentioned, half of those are already under a centralized model. 1 of them is under a centralized hybrid model, and 4 of them are intentionally decentralized, a decentralized model. So the key point, as I mentioned before, was precisely to have different perspectives, different views, just to gather valuable insights around all of this. Something that, before jumping into the more structured data, what we also wanted to capture is, these are 3 quotes out of those interviews. 1 quote from a centralized unit, 1 quote out of the centralized hybrid unit, and 1 quote out of one of the decentralized units. And I'm capturing here in one single slide just to communicate and to share the different perspectives that you can see throughout the story overall. If you look at the centralized perspective, look at what that leader was sharing with us. If you allow a disparate set of units to grow at a different cadence, of course, it's speaking about the units within the higher ed institution, with a non-unified strategic approach, particularly around things like pricing and also quality, you end up cannibalizing yourself. You end up doing what I think is brand and reputational damage. And that's, at least in the particular case of that institution, I would say part of the motivation or rationale to be under a centralized model. I will jump all the way to the right-hand side, where you can see a totally different perspective. We do not want to centralize because we do not want to lose control. And right now, when you have control and you understand the business, which we do in our unit, we are able to be agile and make decisions in a timely manner. So you can see the different perspectives overall. And in the center, centralized hybrid, says we will not be able to move at the speed or scale that we operate if we try to bring absolutely everything in-house, meaning centralized, or if we let the schools and colleges do their own thing. So that's a little more of a, I would say, partially centralized model. With that in mind, if you would ask me, maybe this is a little bit of my professor side speaking, Marco, this is still a lot of information. What are the 1 or 2 key slides out of this presentation? So here is Marco's answer. This is one of the key slides. What we try to do here, this is our effort to, as the younger generation say, and Danielle and others might relate to this. This is the TLDR version, the too long, didn't read version. I didn't have a chance to go through all of it. This is too long, didn't read it. What is the summarized version? It is this one slide. Of course, there are specific details within this that I think are important to highlight. I will go through each one of these 8 dimensions, but the key point out of this visualization is that you must take, as an institution, in terms, your strategy is going to be unique because it is aligned to your unique approach as an institution. But that strategy must imply, at a pretty good extent, taking decisions within each one of these 8 dimensions. I will just highlight them briefly, and I will jump into each one of them in a moment. You have to take decisions in terms of your portfolio strategy, a breadth versus depth approach. And I'm just using my hands. Hopefully you are able to see me, like this so-called capital T for talent development, where we speak about breadth of knowledge the horizontal bar in the T, versus breadth of knowledge, the vertical bar in the capital T. Meaning, when you are putting up your portfolio, some of us are institutions, we are very well recognized in specific academic fields or topics. So that is depth of knowledge. But quite often, when we are pursuing new market opportunities, we also want to diversify and offer programs in other fields. So the key fundamental question is, from a portfolio strategy, what is your approach? I just took a moment to go through that one. I will jump into each one of those in a moment, but just highlighting them right now. Which learning modalities are you going to pursue? From fully immersion, meaning in person, to more the so-called online, maybe not even synchronous, but asynchronous, that allow for scalability, but provide a different type of learning experience. What is your brand architecture? If you are moving towards a more institutional approach versus a school level approach, how do you want to brand things? What is your pricing strategy that was mentioned in one of the quotes? Do you want to provide flexibility in between your units? Are you pursuing entire consistency? There are pros and cons associated to both options. Which revenue, tiny, minor, little detail that I usually highlight, how are you going to allocate revenue? Is it going to be distributed or centralized? And of course, that has different implications with different stakeholders within the institution overall. This one this is maybe a little bit of my professor of data analysis bias speaking, but in an AI enabled world, this is a crucial one. How are you going to handle data? Quite often we speak within our executive education operations about our CRM, our LMS. Well, we have plenty of data that comes in the form of text, names, numbers, nowadays also images, video, etc. Any AI tool is going to be as valuable as the quality of the data that it is using. So what is your data integration strategy? Are you having data distributed, living in different places? Are you having it centralized? Again, there is no unique right answer, but you have to have an answer. Operational scalability, providing some full integration functions. Like, do you want to have a university-wide CRM, or do you want to have it something that is more divided? Do you want to provide units, a more unit level marketing strategy, or a more unified marketing strategy, just to mention a couple examples, financial systems, etc. And what is your lifelong learning positioning? Meaning, something that I usually highlight, we speak about executive education and lifelong learning. Process that in your minds for a second. Executive education and lifelong learning. There is a little bit of a contradiction there, because on one end we say we serve executives, but on the other end we say we serve people at every stage of life. So what is your strategy? What is your positioning? So going relatively fast through each one of those. And again, what we did in each one of these slides was to provide a little bit of a deeper dive into each one of those. Going back for a second to the portfolio strategy, you can see what I was just describing about the breadth and depth. Do you want to go deeper into your flagship academic fields, which is more depth of knowledge? And or do you want to cover breadth? Of course, that in most cases, this is not a binary decision. Quite often we find a point in the middle where you want to be well recognized in the academic fields, the topics that you are actually recognized for, but quite often we can pursue other academic fields or topics as well as part of breadth of knowledge that we provide through our portfolio. And of course, when you start doing this at the university-wide level, you have what I usually frame as broader academic capabilities, because you can bring faculty, subject matter experts associated to different academic units, specialized in different academic fields. So that provides increases the size of the capital T overall, because you can increase both breadth and depth, but of course that presents some, I would say, some related strategic decisions in terms of branding, positioning, etc. Second dimension that I was just describing in terms of learning modalities. I see, and this came out of several conversations with these institutions, but I have heard this as part of our ongoing conversations in several of our UNICON events. Quite often we say, well, we want to reach broader audiences, and quite often one of the, like immersion, meaning in-person executive programs, what we provide as executive education institutions are these high-touch interactive learning moments where we have executives interacting in between all of them, discussing, learning from each other, not just from the faculty or instructor. But quite often, what we are doing nowadays is that we also have online programs. Some of them have online asynchronous content, because quite often what is happening is that the audiences that we have busy schedules. And for them to get on a plane, to fly to the place where we are offering the immersion program is a little bit complicated, but they still want to learn. So what we have done in several cases within our institutions is to try to meet those audiences where they are. And we do that through online offerings, and in some cases, again, asynchronous, with the advantages, but also limitations quite often associated to that. Key strategic question is, and what is your positioning as an institution in terms of the learning modalities that you provide? Do you want to provide all of them? Do you want to be a little more specialized? What are the trade-offs in terms of market opportunities when you decide to be focused on just on some of those? And in terms of branding, positioning, of course, as well. Some of our institutions, we try to communicate that we provide highly interactive learning experiences. Well, that is not necessarily paired with scalability, while at the same time we have ambitious revenue goals as well to reach broader audiences. So how to navigate that as well. The third dimension that I also briefly mentioned is in terms of the brand architecture. To me, this is a very important and controversial one as well. Think of what happens when you start bringing a university-wide portfolio in terms of that integration. Quite often, executive education portfolios are used to position a specific business school. So how do you navigate that when you are pairing that also with the fact that you want to provide a university-wide portfolio with broader academic capabilities? Quite often, employers appreciate the fact that you can provide learning solutions that are not just limited to business-oriented topics, but quite often engineering-oriented topics and public policy, public management, etc. Quite often, an advantage is that when you can actually develop multidisciplinary programs that bring the best, exactly aligned to the needs in terms of the custom programs of those employers, those corporations, governmental entities. But how do you brand that? How do you navigate school-level branding versus institutional branding? Some of the effective approaches that you can see here, a little bit of the umbrella strategy. Yes? Mohammed, you wanted to say something?
I'm good.
Okay. In terms of some of the possible approaches, in the center of the slide, you can see there's one option is the umbrella strategy, where you start a well-established university-wide name for all of your non-degree programs to avoid confusing the market, versus a little more of a selective branding when you go into a little more of the school-level branding overall. And how to navigate that, that's part of the strategic choices that need to be made. You can also see on the right-hand side of this slide, quite often, we say, well, we are executive education. We are not continuing education. And quite often there's a clear difference, but quite often I think this is an uncomfortable topic for some of us that have been for a while within the executive education space. But the fact is that quite often there are more and more fuzzy lines within that, because we are executive education units, but we also have online programs priced at, I don't want to put a specific number, but where maybe a young executives can get enrolled immediately. And that's competing about what other institution is framing as professional or continuing education. Our market is being a little more mixed in terms of that. And again, with the advantages and the challenges associated to that. Fourth dimension, in terms of the pricing strategy, just in a nutshell on this one, how are you going to set prices? Some institutions, what they are doing is that they are following a centralized pricing approach, while other ones have all the way to a not centralized pricing approach, meaning allowing flexibility for academic units, schools, colleges within the higher ed institution to set pricing on their own. Some of them have a little bit of a, I would say, a point in the middle approach where they have, I would say, specific bandwidths where they say, okay, your pricing should be within these bandwidths, such that we make sure that we are not going and competing in an unreasonable manner from a pricing perspective. And of course, this applies to open enrollment and custom programs. When it is a fully flexible approach, of course, that presents some additional challenges in terms of competing based on pricing in between internal institutions. When there is full consistency, of course, there are some advantages, but challenges as well. Some academic units might be used to price things, especially on the business side of things, at a higher level versus other academic units. So that presents some challenges as well. Fifth dimension, the previous one was about how do you price things, but of course, as I was joking, tiny minor little detail, how is revenue allocated? And you will actually see, and we capture this from a couple of institutions, it is not just revenue distribution, but revenue allocation. How is revenue allocated? A couple of institutions are under a fully centralized model, centralizing revenue profit, which can provide some incentives or lack of incentives for some academic units, versus a more distributed, where all profits are allocated to units, which does not support quite often shared services. Again, it is a strategic choice here, and sometimes what some of these institutions share with us is that some of them are fully under the centralized approach because they actually use that to fund some, that's on dimension 6, 7, and 8, some specific shared services like, okay, but we will be covering, and that is on the hybrid pool models. How can we leverage economies of scale to have an integrated CRM system, integrated marketing, integrated financial systems, which allow for more efficiency while taking advantage of economies of scale? But of course, that provides, again, as I mentioned, some challenges as well. Sixth dimension, I mentioned it already as well, learner and client data management, all the way from distributed, having data living in different silos within the institution, which provides quite often the possibility to move in a faster manner, but also some challenges in terms of data integration versus a centralized approach. Especially, again, I personally think, this is my personal point of view on this one in particular, this is a crucial topic in an AI-enabled world. How you handle data in an AI-enabled world. Any AI tool is going to be as valuable, not just as the algorithm that it has to operate, but any AI tool operates based on data, and not even step 1, step 0 in terms of an AI-enabled organization is data integration. Still, that provides some challenges, and integrating data is easy to say, is not that easy to implement. You can see that 50% of the institutions use a hybrid approach to CRM management, which is a key topic in terms of data integration. And 75% of the institutions mentioned that improved client relationship management is a top priority for centralization. Something that was highlighted during one of the conversations was, even my university president is about, this was shared by one of the institutions, my university president is about to meet with the CEO of this major airline. We need to be able to prepare in one day, and sometimes in a couple days, integrated university-wide data on what is it that we have been doing with that organization, with that corporation, university-wide, and having that integrated CRM system allows us to do that, versus gathering data in a more non-structured manner. So just to illustrate that with a specific example. 7 out of the 8 dimensions, operational scalability, and this is actually related to the systems that I was just describing a moment ago. All the way from what we define as the enabler model, what some institutions are doing is that they have these central teams which act as service providers for academic units, for schools, on even not just in terms of the systems, but even in terms of the processes. How can you have a centralized program design and program delivery capability rather than isolated units? And that allows for broader economies of scale and efficiencies but of course, at the same time, present some caveats as well. Some units also have liaison, which is using portfolio representatives within each school or college within the university to build trust between the centralized schools and the central organization overall. And most of the institutions, 88% of them reported greater efficiency in resource allocation as a realized opportunity. Of course, 90% of them also mentioned faculty selection and coordination is a top operational challenge, and that's what presents some of the challenges as well. Final piece in terms of the last dimension, I mentioned this one briefly as well. How to navigate the exclusivity that quite often characterizes an executive education approach versus when we are under, I would say, ambitious growth goals, we want to reach broader audiences. So how to navigate that, especially under the narrative of a lifelong learning continuum, because when we speak about that lifelong learning continuum, okay, I serve executives, but I'm doing this at every stage of life. So are you serving just executives? Are you doing this at every stage of life? How do you navigate that from a branding perspective? And one key point that I would say a couple of these institutions are quite advanced already. This is not just about the non-degree offerings. In most cases, what we offer as executive education units are non-degree offerings. Some of those might be credit eligible towards quite often a master's degree. But beyond that, how to link degree and non-degree offerings through these so-called stackable offerings. Quite often you can take a non-degree offering and start maybe earning credit towards a degree. How do you connect that with alumni through shared credentials to create a virtuous cycle of loyalty? One of the key metrics within our industry, I usually highlight that when I talk to deans, to provosts, etc., is a key fundamental difference in the non-degree space, in this case, the executive education space, versus the degree-oriented space. In the degree-oriented space, I'm simplifying things, but it is a three-stage model. You are a prospect, you turn into a student, you turn into an alumni. So you go through those three stages. What happens in the non-degree space, in the executive education, continuous professional learning space, is that re-engagement is one of our key success metrics. Whoever took an offering with us today, we want that individual to take an offering with us 2 months, 5 months, a year from now. Same thing with corporations, with employers that we work with. So how to position that within the lifelong learning continuum. So going back to this one slide, again, after visiting each one of those, as I mentioned, these are the eight key dimensions. Just to wrap it up and open it up for some comments, insights that you might want to share. Here is one slide that I would say this is one of my second. I will frame this one as the second key slide. I mentioned this at the very beginning, but I will just underscore it. 2 things. There is no unique right model. Whether centralized or decentralized, the choice must align with institutional culture and market positioning. What is important to me, and I will go back to this slide for a second, is not taking decisions within each one of these 8 key dimensions is a problem. So what is your unique strategy? You need to take decisions, and to me, this is the value out of this framework overall. This comes paired with change management. Centralization/decentralization is not just a structural shift. It is a journey of building trust. This is something that came up through several of the conversations overall. Building trust between academic units, the administration, of course, is a key part of that cultural change management. And of course, the role of leaders. This success requires transparency, clear benefits to faculty, and patience with cultural shifts. And again, underscoring that no single right model for all institutions at the bottom of this slide, but defining your institutions, and that was the ultimate goal of this research project, defining your institution's model by addressing the deliberate strategic choices presented through these dimensions is key to enhancing institutional resilience and learner impact. And thank you for dropping that in the chat as well, Melanie. As Melanie mentions in the past, lifelong learning can sound so comprehensive, as in from birth to death, and it could include every kind of topic anyone wants to learn. I usually joke saying, trying to be absolutely everything to everyone is quite often not the best strategy. You have to make strategic choices, which speaks precisely to Melanie's point. But I think it's a super important point as well. Making sure that I leave some time for Q&A, for discussion. I know several of you already, but for others, here is my email address, the QR code to my LinkedIn profile, the website link to our UNICON website, where actually you can go and get information. I'm trying to do my best here, Danielle, for you have a lot of information about our events, about our different research projects like this one. So you can go to that one just to gather further information. So I know that was a lot. I know that it's sometimes exhausting to be listening to Marco for 35, 40 minutes, but happy to open it up for comments, questions, anything that you might want me to speak a little more about.
Questions? Stuart has a question.
Hey, Marco, good to see you. It was really good piece of work. We talked a lot about centralization, and I'm hearing a lot of talk about this. So it's a great webinar to kind of come on. But a lot of the centralization has always been about going to the university centre. And you made a good point around exec ed and us knowing kind of what we're doing in the business school, and we're experts at doing this. Did you see any models where like there's a hub and spoke model? The hub sits in a business school, and a business school services the whole institution, as opposed to it having to go to the university and the university services. Have you seen examples of that?
Yes, short answer. It's a very, very good question, honestly, Stuart, because what we observed on a couple cases was the fact that university-wide, there is this need to say, we need to get better at this. Where to start? And the word said, where is it that we're already doing this? Hey, look at our executive education unit. We're already doing it there. And it seems that we are, if in some cases, they're already, I would say they're already really good at it. In some cases, they're just the ones that are doing it in the best way compared to the rest of the university. So I would say in some cases, I think that it has been identified as a point to say, maybe we can start leading this from here. And one of the institutions that we talked to, they were actually thinking, this was part of the decision-making process, where they were thinking about maybe we create this university-wide unit, but should be led by the executive education unit within the business school, because they're the ones that are the best at doing it.
Okay, that's good to know. And sorry, just one more question. Was I guess the subsidiary company model, so a private company sitting off a university, was that discussed as being a model that's being used? We do use it in the UK, but I don't know if it's used kind of on a more wider basis.
You mean partnering with like with private organizations, kind of OPMs?
No, so I guess so in the UK we have, so I'm actually based in AMBS, and I'm part of the school, but often universities will have a company that they own that they put the CPD into. So I was just wondering if that model is being used across the people that were interviewed and in the US and wider.
Not at least under my knowledge, I would say, and not out of the conversations that we had through these institutions. I can think of a couple institutions that have explored that a little more at the university-wide level, but that didn't come up, at least through this subset of institutions that we considered for the research project.
Okay. Cheers, Marco. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Don't tell me I was that good. I'm sure I was confusing at a couple topics.
Hey, Marco.
I have a question for you, Marco.
Hey, Marco, this is Timo speaking. How are you doing?
Hey, Timo, good to see you.
So, I'm not sure whether it's a question. It's probably question/comment. When we think about lifelong learning, obviously there's numerous challenges. Many of them you have mentioned with your framework. One that is probably implicitly there, but maybe you can share your thoughts on operating model, right? So when you move from a typical exec ed program, sales, delivery with a start date, with an end date into a more lifelong learning suited product area, what's your view on to what extent the operating model or what the operating model looks like in terms of old and new or exec ed and lifelong learning?
Yeah, I think, and I will share my screen for a second, maybe just to try to answer it, Timo. To me, that falls under the seventh dimension, operational scalability, because I think when I was presenting, I was speaking mainly about systems, processes, also a little bit about the culture. But one of the, and I will use, I think that 2, 3 of the institutions examples cases come to my mind, and this relates to Melanie's comment as well. When you bring together this university-wide approach and saying now we want to get better, we want to redefine what we do as a higher education institution. Again, going back to what I was describing at the beginning, in addition to being research-oriented knowledge creation, in addition to serving degree-seeking audiences, we want to effectively serve individuals at every stage of life. So part of the advantages and challenges associated to that, and I think that's what your question is leaning towards, is let me use a couple examples. Some institutions have a teacher's college, and that is strongly focused in what we define in the US as the K-12 system, basic primary school. You have another school or college that has a lot of work and programs that are offered for people after retirement, the so-called gray economy. Okay, so advantage out of that is that from a general branding approach is now you can it gives you an opportunity to communicate how you are serving broader audiences. That's an advantage, but a challenge associated to that is, of course, on how you are operationalizing that, because you have those units with a strong presence within each of those segments. And part of the hypothesis is that now you want to bring everything to all of those audiences. So not everything, but whatever might be relevant to each of those audiences. So how to operationalize all of that quite often presents some of the challenges in terms of the operations, the systems, the pricing, the revenue allocation. So that maybe my answer is partially helpful in the sense that goes back to the 8 dimensions in terms of saying you need to have an answer to each of those things in order to implement that.
So, well, I wasn't so much looking for the answer, right? Because I think every institution needs to see what the operating model looks like, how easy they can adjust this to meet different areas of the business. So from that perspective, of course, there's not that one answer. When we think about what we need to do to make this happen, and we're trying to wrap this around to 3 main characteristics, right? Such as personalization, continuity, and blended learning methodologies that are not necessarily all formal learning, but also non-formal learning. Then, of course, that creates quite a shock to the current system, right? So
Yeah.
it becomes more of a change management challenge to introduce new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking about product management, product innovations, and so forth. And yeah, this is just a couple of things that we try to get our head around on a daily basis.
I think you're spot on on that, Tim. And actually, I think that connects with the, or at least in my mind, that connected with the question that Shalini just shared in the chat, because to your point and to Shalini's question, one of the things that I would say, let me speak about the positive and the challenging side out of it. What surprised me was the strong growing interest among institutions, I would say to explore / to get better at this. Okay. I think that I've been within executive education, but with a strong focus on university-wide approaches for I would say at this point for the last 12 to 15 years of my life. I wasn't expecting that there will be this amount of institutions already thinking about this. And I think what came to my mind was, why are they thinking about this? And this was part of the conversations as well. And I think that the why, that takes me to the challenging part. I think that the why is the reasons on the why are ranked in a different manner within institutions. What I mean by that is some institutions are crystal clear that they want and they need to do this because that is what is needed out there. Other institutions are more in the sense that, you know what, I'm struggling with degree-oriented revenue. I'm struggling with research-oriented funds. I need to diversify. What else do I do? Oh, I do this. Okay, tell me how I can bring more money. I'm just being very direct and transparent, but to me, that's the why, and I think that's at the same time, this market, if I may frame it as this is a growing market, so there are broader opportunities there. As it happens within executive education, quite often we're competing against non-university-based providers. So this is a growing market as well. So I'm just building up on what you just said, Timo, and Shaline's question to say, this is a growing market. More and more stakeholders, leaders within higher ed institutions, I think, are thinking more and more about this, but they are doing that for different reasons as well. So I'm just trying to do my best to summarize all of that and answer Shaline's question as well.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question, possibly two. I've got a question for you, Marco. Early on, you talked about exec ed being flexible and able to respond quickly in the context that's something characteristic for us. And I think many of us take that as a point of pride that we're able to do that and be responsive to customers and needs. In the conversations that you had, I guess the question that comes to mind is, do you see that changing at all as executive education becomes more visible and part of a coordinated effort at the university level?
Yeah. Good question as well, Eric. Short answer will say, by far, yes, in terms of the visibility of executive education units. And again, my answer is based on what we also observed through this research project and what I have observed even prior to it as well. But I think the visibility of executive education units, I would say, has increased in a pretty significant manner within higher education institutions, because I think there's a greater and better awareness on the need to be more responsive to the needs of what is happening out there. And again, I think that we executive education units are pretty good at that compared to the traditional higher ed institution. I'm sure that a lot of you have seen that. Like, I will use maybe a simple, silly example. As it happened with several different topics prior to AI, but most recently with AI, very, very recent with agentic AI, we identified that need out there in the market. We have programs that are helping individuals, executives, organizations address that. In the degree-oriented side of things, there you will have a discussion to incorporate a course, and maybe 2 years from now, you will have a degree focus on AI in business. Like the timelines are way longer. So I think that the positioning of executive education units as lean and agile units has increased. Caveat to that is that quite often we are also seen as an additional cash flow opportunity without having further context. So how to navigate that from an institutional perspective is, of course, an important topic and something worth to navigate in a careful manner.
Great. Thank you. All right. So I think we are just about at the top of the hour. Marco, thank you very much for coming in and talking about this important work. And thanks also to Cate for collaborating with you on the writing. She couldn't be with us today, but it's a major contribution. If you have not already seen the article, the paper, it is available to download from the UNICON research page on our website. And of course, watch the UNICON newsletter for upcoming future events. Daniele, Melanie, thank you so much. And I think we will close. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Eric.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good seeing you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Marco. Bye
Bye.
all.